Right now, in parking lots from Texas to Ohio, you can watch something most Americans are walking past without noticing. Carts are heavier than they were 6 months ago. The same shoppers are coming back twice a week instead of once. And the items piling up in those carts are not the trendy ones, they are the quiet ones, the shelf-stable ones, the ones that used to sit untouched at the bottom of the pantry. There are 9 specific foods quietly disappearing from American shelves in waves, and the people grabbing them first are not panicking. They are calculating. Grocery prices are up more than 25% since 2020, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The average American household now wastes roughly $1,500 in food a year while simultaneously paying more for less. This shift has been building for over 36 months, and it accelerates this summer. This affects nearly every household in the country, and most people will not see it until the gap on the shelf is already there. The stores that look fully stocked are masking the shift by spreading thinner inventory across wider facings. You walk in, you see abundance, you walk out, the data tells a different story. One of the 9 items on this list has been used by humans for over 5,000 years in stores longer than most marriages last. One of them costs less than $2 today and could be worth 30 times that in a real disruption. And one of them is sitting in almost every American kitchen right now, completely overlooked, even though it is the single most strategic food a household can hold. Let's begin. Number 9, canned tuna. A 6-ounce can of Bumblebee Chunk-Light tuna sold for around 89 cents in 2019. That same can now retails between $1.79 and $2.40 at most major chains, a price increase north of 100% in 5 years. Tuna is one of the most efficient protein per dollar foods in the American pantry, and it is being silently repriced in real time. The supply chain story behind this is not complicated, but it is rarely told. Global tuna catches have plateaued. The Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, which manages roughly 60% of the world's tuna supply, has tightened catch limits multiple times since 2021. At the same time, fuel costs for industrial fishing fleets have doubled. Starkist quietly settled a price-fixing case years ago, and the entire canned tuna industry has been consolidating ever since. Fewer producers, tighter supply, higher floor prices. That is not a temporary blip. That is a structural reset. What most people do not realize is that properly stored canned tuna in oil has a usable shelf life of 3 to 5 years past the printed date. According to United States Department of Agriculture guidance on commercially canned low-acid foods. The oil-packed version stores longer than water-packed because oil resists oxidation. If you want to hold protein in your pantry without a freezer, this is one of the densest options available. Buy in flats of 24. Store in a cool, dark closet under 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Rotate the oldest cans into your weekly meals so nothing expires unused. At current prices, a single flat covers roughly 12,000 calories of complete protein for under $50. That number will not hold much longer. But the next item is even more vulnerable because it depends on something most Americans assume will always be cheap. Number 8, coffee. The wholesale price of Arabica coffee beans hit a 4.7-year high in early 2025, crossing $4.30 a pound on the futures market. That is more than triple the price from 2019. Folgers, Maxwell House, and store brand ground coffee have all been quietly reformulated, downsized, or repriced. The 3.0-ounce can you used to buy is now 24 ounces for the same shelf price. The reason is brutal and simple. Brazil, which produces roughly 40% of the world's Arabica coffee, suffered consecutive droughts and frosts between 2021 and 2024. Vietnam, the world's largest Robusta producer, has been hit by its worst dry season in nearly a decade. The International Coffee Organization has warned of structural deficits through 2026. This is not speculation. This is the same supply pattern that triggered the Great Coffee Shortage of 1977. When Brazilian frost destroyed 70% of the crop and American retail prices nearly tripled within a year, people who held coffee in 1976 effectively held currency in 1977. Mainstream financial news rarely covers commodity-level pressure like this in plain language because food inflation stories make advertisers nervous and discourage consumer spending. The incentive is to soothe, not to inform. So you have to read past the headlines. For the household, the move is straightforward. Vacuum-sealed whole bean coffee stored in a cool, dark place holds quality for 9 to 12 months. Frozen in airtight bags, it stretches to 2 years with minimal flavor loss. Instant coffee, freeze-dried and unopened, has a documented shelf life of 15 to 20 years according to military ration testing and Brigham Young University food storage research. Buy 3 months ahead of your normal consumption. At current trajectories, the gap between today's price and next year's price will more than cover the cost of buying now. And that brings us to something far more essential than caffeine. Number 7, cooking oils. A 4.8-ounce bottle of Wesson vegetable oil cost about $3.99 in 2019. The same bottle now sits between $7 and $9 in most regions, an increase of roughly 100%. Olive oil has been even more violent. Spanish extra virgin olive oil, which supplies roughly half the world market, doubled in wholesale price between 2022 and 2024 due to 2 consecutive drought years in Andalusia. Cooking oil is one of those silent inputs. You do not notice the price until you are pouring it. But every fried egg, every sautéed vegetable, every loaf of homemade bread depends on it. During the 2022 sunflower oil disruption caused by the Russia-Ukraine conflict, European supermarkets in the United Kingdom and Spain imposed rationing within weeks. 2 bottles per customer. Empty shelves within 48 hours of a news cycle. That happened in developed economies with full logistics networks in less than a month. What people miss about cooking oil is its strategic value beyond the kitchen. Oil is fuel for oil lamps in a power outage. It is a long-term skin and leather conditioner. It is the base for soap making. It is in cold weather an emergency lubricant. Refined vegetable oil sealed and stored at room temperature holds usable quality for 1 to 2 years. Coconut oil, due to its saturated fat structure, holds 3 to 5 years. Properly stored ghee, which is clarified butter with the milk solids removed, has been documented to keep for over a decade. Buy in larger containers. The per ounce price drops sharply at the 1 gallon size. Store away from heat and light. Rotate annually. If oil prices follow the trajectory analysts at the USDA Economic Research Service have projected, today's bottle will look like a bargain by next spring. But there is something even more fundamental on this list, and it is the food humans have fought wars over. Number 6, rice. Long grain white rice currently retails between 90 cents and $1 and 20 cents per pound in most American supermarkets. That price is up roughly 40% from 2019. The global picture is more concerning. India, which supplies over 40% of the world's rice exports, imposed an export ban on non-basmati white rice in July 2023. They partially lifted it in late 2024, but the message was sent. The largest rice exporter on Earth will choose its own population over global supply when conditions tighten. Rice is the staple food for over half the planet. When India restricts exports, prices ripple through every importing country within days. The Philippines, a major rice consumer, saw retail prices spike over 20% in a single quarter. The United States imports a meaningful portion of its specialty rice, including jasmine and basmati, from countries directly affected by these restrictions. The historical parallel here is the 2008 global rice crisis. In April of that year, rice prices tripled in international markets within 6 months. Costco and Sam's Club in the United States imposed purchase limits on 2 0-pound bags. People who had not thought about rice in years suddenly could not buy it in quantity. That episode lasted about a year. The structural conditions today are arguably tighter than they were in 2008. White rice, properly stored in a sealed container with oxygen absorbers, has a documented shelf life of 25 to 30 years, according to BYU Food Storage Research. Brown rice, because of its oil content, only lasts 6 to 12 months in pantry conditions. If you are storing rice for the long term, white is the answer, despite the nutritional trade-off. Buy in 20 or 50-pound bags. Repack into food-grade Mylar bags with 500 cubic centimeter oxygen absorbers. Store off concrete floors in a cool location, away from pests. 1 50-pound bag, properly stored, feeds an adult roughly 100 days at 2 cups of cooked rice per day. Therefore, the next item is the one that pairs with rice in almost every culture that survived a famine. Number 5, dried beans. Pinto beans, black beans, navy beans, and lentils have all risen between 30% and 60% in retail price since 2020. A 1-pound bag of dried pinto beans that cost roughly $1.10 in 2019 now runs between $1.70 and $2.20, depending on the region. The increase looks modest until you calculate it across the protein per dollar curve, where beans remain the cheapest complete protein source in any American supermarket when paired with a grain. The supply chain pressure on beans comes from two directions. First, water. The American West, which produces a large share of domestic dry bean output, has been in a multi-decade drought pattern. Irrigation costs for bean farmers in Idaho, Michigan, and North Dakota have risen sharply. Second, labor. Bean harvesting and processing relies on a labor force that has tightened considerably since 2021. Higher input costs flow directly to the shelf price. What almost no one tells you about dried beans is their effective shelf life. The USDA states that dried beans stored in airtight containers in a cool, dry place retain edible quality indefinitely, though they become harder to cook after about 10 years. BYU researchers documented dried beans still safe and nutritious after 30 years of proper storage. The catch is the cooking time. Older beans need longer soaks and longer cooks, sometimes with the addition of a small amount of baking soda to soften the skins. The reason mainstream food media does not push beans as a storage staple is that beans do not generate advertising revenue. There is no national bean brand campaign. There is no marketing budget behind lentils. The incentive structure in food journalism flows toward branded, packaged, processed foods. Beans get ignored not because they fail nutritionally, but because they fail commercially. Buy in 10 or 20 pound bags from a warehouse club or feed store, not in retail 1 pound bags, where the per pound price is twice as high. Repack into Mylar with oxygen absorbers if you want maximum shelf life. 20 pounds of pinto beans stored correctly will outlast almost everything else in your pantry. But the next item is the one that makes everything else edible. Number 4, salt. A 2 6-ounce canister of Morton iodized table salt costs roughly $1.20 today. In 2019, it was around 79 cents. That is a 50% increase on what most people consider the cheapest food product in America. Sea salt and specialty salts have risen far more. Here is what makes salt different from everything else on this list. Salt does not expire. Pure sodium chloride, sealed against moisture, is shelf stable for thousands of years. Salt was used as currency in the Roman Empire. The word salary comes directly from the Latin word for salt. Caravans crossed the Sahara for it. Wars were fought over salt taxes. Gandhi led a 240-mile march in 1930 specifically to break the British monopoly on it. The supply story on salt is rarely discussed because salt feels infinite. It is not. The vast majority of American table salt comes from a small number of large operations, and the trucking, packaging, and distribution costs have all climbed. Road salt demand competes with food salt in winter months. Specialty salts from the Mediterranean, the Himalayas, and Hawaii all depend on long, fragile supply chains. What people miss is that salt is not just a seasoning, it is a preservative. Before refrigeration, salt is what kept meat, fish, and vegetables edible through winter. A 1 0-pound bag of plain pickling salt, costing under $8 today, can preserve dozens of pounds of meat through traditional curing. Salt brines vegetables into long-term ferments like sauerkraut and kimchi that hold for months without refrigeration. Salt heals wounds. Salt purifies water in combination with other methods. Salt makes an edible food edible. The action here is simple. Buy at least 25 pounds of non-iodized salt in addition to your normal table salt. Pickling salt and canning salt are pure sodium chloride without anti-caking agents, which is what you want for long-term preservation. Store in a dry location in food-grade buckets. The total cost is under $20. The strategic value in the right moment is incalculable, which leads us directly into something even more overlooked. Number 3, honey. A 1-2-ounce bear of pure honey at most American supermarkets now sells for between $6 and $9, up from around $3.50 in 2019. Bulk honey at warehouse clubs has risen similarly. The cause is colony collapse, drought stress on flowering plants, a wave of honey adulteration scandals that have driven consumers toward verified pure suppliers who charge a premium. The American honey industry has been quietly stressed for over a decade. The USDA has documented annual honeybee colony losses ranging from 30% to 45% every year since 2006. A significant portion of honey sold in the United States is imported, and a documented portion of that imported honey has historically been adulterated with rice syrup, corn syrup, prompting tighter testing and a contraction in available verified honey on shelves. But honey is on this list for a reason that goes far beyond a sweetener. Pure raw honey, properly sealed, does not spoil. Archaeologists opened sealed pots of honey in Egyptian tombs that were over 3,000 years old, and the honey was still edible. The combination of low water content, low pH, and natural hydrogen peroxide production makes honey antimicrobial. It has been used medicinally for wound dressing for thousands of years and is still used in modern hospitals for treating certain burns and ulcers. This is the item that has been used by humans for over 5,000 years and outlasts almost any food in storage. It is calorie dense, 21 calories per teaspoon, 60 calories per tablespoon. It does not require refrigeration. It treats sore throats, minor wounds, and is one of the few foods that can be safely stored essentially forever with no special preparation. Mainstream nutrition coverage rarely emphasizes honey's strategic value because the industry framing is sugar versus sugar substitutes, not pantry resilience. The advertising dollars flow toward processed sweeteners, so honey gets reduced to a tea additive when it is functionally one of the most concentrated, stable calorie sources you can hold. Buy raw, unfiltered honey by the gallon. A 1 gallon jug from a trusted apiary or warehouse club costs between $40 and $60. Store at room temperature, sealed, away from direct light. If it crystallizes, warm the container in a bowl of warm water and it returns to liquid. 1 gallon holds roughly 11,000 calories of stable energy in a single container, but the next item is the one that quietly underpins almost every meal you eat. Number 2, wheat flour and whole wheat berries. A 5-pound bag of all-purpose flour cost roughly $2.20 in 2019. Today it runs between $3.70 and $4.50, an increase of roughly 70% to 100%. Bread prices have followed. The global wheat picture is one of the most concerning on this entire list. The Russia-Ukraine conflict disrupted roughly a quarter of the world's wheat exports starting in 2022. Drought in the American Great Plains has reduced hard red winter wheat yields multiple years in a row. Australian and Canadian harvests have been volatile. The USDA's World Agricultural Outlook Board has revised global wheat stockpile estimates downward repeatedly since 2022. Here's the part that most people miss. All-purpose flour, the white refined product most Americans buy, has a shelf life of only 6 to 12 months in pantry conditions before it begins to lose quality and develop off flavors. Whole wheat berries, the unmilled grain, store for 30 years or longer when properly sealed with oxygen absorbers. According to BYU Food Storage Research and USDA Grain Storage Guidance, a 50-pound bucket of hard red winter wheat berries costs roughly $40 to $60 today. That bucket, milled fresh, produces over 75 pounds of flour equivalent in usable baking output. The action is to buy whole wheat berries rather than flour, and to acquire a simple hand crank or electric grain mill. A basic hand mill costs under $100. With wheat berries and a mill, you can produce fresh flour for years from a single 50-pound bucket. The flavor is dramatically better than store-bought flour, the nutritional retention is higher, and the shelf stability is multiplied by a factor of 30. Historical context here matters. During both World War I and World War II, the United States government ran formal wheat conservation programs. Meatless Mondays and Wheatless Wednesdays were federal policy. Households that knew how to bake with stored grain ate normally while neighbors waited in lines. That muscle memory disappeared from American households roughly 2 generations ago. It is being quietly relearned now, and that brings us to the number 1 item on this list. The one teased at the beginning, the one sitting in almost every American kitchen, completely overlooked, even though it is the single most strategic food a household can hold. Number 1, white rice was on this list, salt was on this list, honey was on this list. But the item that beats all of them on combined criteria of shelf life, price stability, nutritional density, and cultural invisibility is rolled oats and steel-cut oats. A 2-ounce canister of Quaker old-fashioned rolled oats costs roughly $3.20 in 2019. Today it sits between $5 and $6.50, an increase of roughly 70% to 100%. Oats are quietly one of the most efficient stored foods in the American pantry, and almost no one treats them as such. They are seen as a breakfast cereal. They are, in reality, a complete carbohydrate, fiber, and partial protein source that store for 30 years in proper conditions. BYU's long-term food storage research documents rolled oats sealed in mylar with oxygen absorbers, retaining edible quality and nutritional value beyond 3 decades. The supply chain story behind oats is the climate story of the northern grain belt. Canada is the world's largest oat exporter. The Canadian prairies suffered a historic drought in 2021 that cut oat production by over 40% in a single year. American oat acreage has been declining for decades as corn and soy displaced it. The remaining production is concentrated in a few states and a few Canadian provinces, all subject to the same climate volatility. The reason oats sit unnoticed in nearly every American kitchen, while the household pays attention to flashier foods, is the same incentive structure that pushed beans into the background. Oats do not have a national marketing budget commensurate with their nutritional value. The cereal aisle is dominated by processed, branded, sugar-loaded products with high margins. Plain oats sit in a tube on a low shelf and ask nothing of the consumer. That invisibility is your advantage. A single 50-pound bag of rolled oats, purchased from a feed-grade source rated for human consumption or from a wholesale supplier, costs between $30 and $50. Repacked into mylar bags with oxygen absorbers and stored in food-grade buckets, that 50 pounds becomes a 30-year strategic reserve of roughly 80,000 calories. 1 cup of dry oats provides approximately 300 calories, 11 grams of protein, and 8 grams of fiber. Cooked with honey from your stored supply, water, and a pinch of salt from your 2 5-pound reserve. It becomes a complete meal at a cost of cents per serving. The realization that reframes this entire list is that the most strategic foods are not the exotic ones, not the trendy ones, not the freeze-dried buckets sold by emergency preparedness companies for hundreds of dollars. The most strategic foods are the cheapest, most invisible, most overlooked items on the lowest shelves of the grocery store. Salt, oats, beans, rice, honey, wheat berries, oil, coffee, and tuna. 9 ordinary items. None of them require special equipment. None of them require special skill. All of them have been keeping human households alive for centuries while the rest of the food industry rearranged itself around margins and marketing. Your action this week is simple. Choose 1 item from this list, buy the largest format you can afford, store it correctly, then do it again next week with the next item. Within 9 weeks, you will have built a pantry that outlasts almost anything the supply chain can throw at it, for less than a single panic buying trip would cost during an actual shortage. The people walking out of those parking lots with heavy carts are not afraid. They are early. The shoppers who notice the pattern 6 months from now will be the ones paying double for what is left. If you are the kind of person who watches the world carefully and notices what other people miss, you have already started thinking about which item on this list is sitting in your kitchen right now and how much of it you actually have. Tell me in the comments which of the 9 you are starting with this week. Be specific. Salt, oats, rice, beans, honey, oil, coffee, tuna, or wheat. The answers in the comments become a map for everyone else reading. Subscribe and join the families who are watching the shelves before the shelves change. The next breakdown looks at 3 specific household items, not foods, that are quietly disappearing from American shelves right now. And one of them is something you used yesterday without thinking about it,